There are moments when life quietly breaks you open, not to end you, but to let the light in through the cracks. Some call it rock bottom, others call it awakening. If you've ever stood in that quiet darkness, unsure if you'd ever rise again, stay a while. Subscribe to the Tales Beyond Word for more motivation and healing, and let this story remind you that even endings can learn to breathe again. She never planned to fall apart, no one does. But one morning, the kind where even the air felt tired, Emily sat on the cold floor of her apartment, her back against the wall, her phone silent, her thoughts loud. The world she had built around her, the job, the friends, the dreams, had all crumbled into something unrecognizable. The career she gave her youth to was gone. The person she thought would never leave had walked away. And for the first time in years, she couldn't recognize herself in the mirror. She wasn't angry, just empty, like a candle that had burned too long until the flame finally surrendered. Everyone told her it would get better. They said time heals everything. But no one talks about the silence between the breaking and the healing, the days that stretch endlessly when even breathing feels like a decision. So she did what broken souls do. When they don't know where to go, she stopped moving. Days blurred, nights stretched. She wake, stare at the ceiling, and wonder if this was all she'd ever be now, a quiet echo of who she once was. Until one afternoon, something small happened. The kind of small that doesn't look like much, but it was everything. A letter slipped under her door. No name, no sender, just 5 words, written in uneven ink. "You're still allowed to try." Emily stared at it for hours. The handwriting looked like a stranger, or maybe her own, from a version of herself that still believed. She didn't know who wrote it, but it found her exactly when she needed it. The next morning she opened her curtains. It doesn't sound like much, but it was. The light hurt her eyes. She hadn't seen morning in weeks. Dust danced in the golden rays, and for the first time in a long while she noticed something beautiful, something small but alive. That day she took a shower, brushed her hair, walked outside. Each step felt heavier than it should, like wadding through grief, but she kept walking. She didn't go far, just to the cafe down the street. She sat by the window, holding a cup of coffee that warmed her palms more than her heart. And yet she was there, present, breathing. Sometimes that's where healing begins, not in big moments, but in tiny ones we almost overlook. The barista smiled at her, a soft, ordinary thing. Emily smiled back, awkwardly but real, and that small exchange, that flicker of human warmth, stayed with her all day. She began walking more often, buying small notebooks, jotting down fragments of thoughts, half-finished sentences, words she wished someone would have told her. "It's okay to rest. You're not your mistakes. Some endings are beginnings in disguise." Little by little, those words began to sound like her own voice again. One evening she went to the park near her old apartment, a place she once shared with the person who left. She hadn't gone there since they said goodbye. It was painful standing there again, but she noticed something new. The trees had grown thicker. The flowers she once ignored were blooming wildly now. Time had moved, even when she couldn't. And in that quiet realization, something softened in her chest. Maybe she hadn't been stuck all this time. Maybe she'd just been healing in silence, the way seeds do beneath the earth before they rise again. She began painting again, a hobby she abandoned years ago because she thought it was practical. At first her strokes were shaky, uncertain. But soon, colors started to pour out, soft pastels, golden dawns, fragments of emotion she didn't have words for. Each canvas became a conversation between who she was and who she was becoming. One night, as she painted, she whispered to herself, "Maybe rock bottom isn't where you end. Maybe it's where you begin again, without all the noise, without the pretending, without the fear." The words felt truer than anything she'd said in years. She started meeting new people, not many, just a few gentle souls who understood quiet hearts. They didn't ask her to be better. They just let her be. And in their quiet company, she found herself laughing again, a sound she had forgotten how to make. It wasn't a sudden transformation. There were still days when she felt heavy, when the world seemed too sharp. But now she had small anchors: morning light, warm coffee, paint-stained fingers, kind words. Little things that reminded her that she was still here, still trying, still allowed to try. And as she stood one evening on her balcony, watching the sunset stretch across the sky in fatting gold, she realized something she never could have understood before. Rock bottom had never been her ending. It was her foundation. The place where she learned who she was without the titles, the noise, the people she thought defined her. It was where she discovered that self-worth isn't built from success or validation. It grows quietly, like light beneath the door, when everything else fades. It's in the courage to wake up one more time, in the softness of forgiving yourself, in the grace of simply beginning again. She picked up the letter one last time, the one that started it all, and smiled. She didn't need to know who wrote it anymore, because now she understood it had always been her, the part of her that refused to disappear even when everything else did. That night she lit a candle and whispered to the dark, "Thank you for breaking me open enough to see myself." And in that fragile glow, she finally felt at peace. Not the loud, triumphant kind, but the quiet kind that simply rests in your chest and says, "You made it." Because sometimes, rock bottom isn't the ground. It's the first solid place you stand after the fall. And maybe that's where becoming truly begins. Some stories don't end, they simply change shape, breathing through the hearts that need them. If this one found you when the world felt heavy, maybe it's because your own beginning is waiting too, quietly, just beyond the pain. Stay close, and if this story touches a quiet part of your heart, let it guide you toward the next here, on the Tales Beyond Word. Subscribe for more motivation and healing, and keep walking gently toward yourself.